Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. It's been a while since it's come up, but I have a great love for Fruits Basket. It was the first manga series I kept up with as it was publishing, looking up release dates, saving gift cards and birthday money because I wasn't even old enough to have a job yet. I love the story, and I fell in love with Natsuki Takaya's art style and writing. It was the first anime I already knew going into it, and the first time I felt that particular disappointment when the anime adaptation failed to live up to its source material. Speaking of, while I don't currently have any plans to review it, what I've seen of the remake has been fantastic. It is faithful to the manga down to the tiniest details, like better than I dared to hope for. My point is, the original Fruits Basket was an experience for me. It definitely shaped my love and expectations for storytelling in this medium, so when I happened upon a 3-volume series called Fruits Basket Another, there was no chance of me just walking away. Fruits Basket Another tells the story of Sawa Mitoma as she starts her first year of high school. Sawa is meek and pessimistic. Life is literally passing her by because her eyes are always glued to the floor, causing her to miss things going on around her. She does her best not to interact with others, believing it's always just a matter of time before she'll do something to inconvenience them, and they'll drop her as quickly as her last group of friends did, all the way back in elementary school. Our story opens on her first day, and things already aren't going well. She's already in trouble with a teacher for being late, after being delayed by her very judgmental landlady because her single mother is behind on the rent. And this just barely scratches the surface of all the things that are going on in her life. But she's saved by Mutsuki Soma, the current prince of the school. In return for his help, he asks her to stop by the student council room at the end of the day, where she meets his cousin Hajime, accidentally steps on him, in fact, as he was napping on the floor, so she apologizes in a panic and runs away, without getting to see what Mutsuki wanted to talk about. She finds out the next day, however, when she sees the notice posted announcing that she's been appointed to the student council. This is how her journey with the Soma family begins. At this point, you're probably asking the same questions I was. What exactly is Fruits Basket Another? Why do all the characters look almost identical to, or like knockoff versions of the original cast? It's actually kind of oddly vague. It's only through conversations the various Somas have about their parents, and then the obvious resemblances once those hints have been planted, that it's ever established that Fruits Basket Another is a true sequel, rather than some kind of fanbook or alternate universe spin-off, which were my first two guesses. Next generation sequels are usually just so in your face about that particular nature of their stories. When I didn't see it mentioned at all, I figured that couldn't be the case here, but it turns out the only case of the resemblance being a coincidence is Sawa looking like Toru, Mutsuki and Hajime are Yuki and Kyo's sons, and the direct heritage of all the other Somas we meet are pretty obvious too. In hindsight, I actually kind of like that Fruits Basket Another didn't try to rely entirely on its parent series to market itself. There's a little of that, of course, given they share a name, but it would have had a very different feel if the manga's summary blurb on the back had just been like, "Hey, remember those characters you loved? Come read a story about their kids," which was basically how it was with Boruto a few years ago, and more recently with Yasuhime. For the latter, I still couldn't give you even the fuzziest description of what the story is actually about. So I really appreciate that Sawa has her own story, and the publishers were confident about telling it. The familiarity may have been a big draw, but it didn't feel like a cheap marketing tactic. I worried a bit about what I was going to do about spoilers here. The series is so short that there's not much you can get into without touching on the plot points that become big endgame parts of the tale, and I do want to avoid spoilers because I feel it's worth reading. But I think I can explore why I came to really like Sawa's character without revealing too many specifics of her tale. She's under a lot of pressure in her daily life, and nothing drags her down more often than her own self-esteem. But I feel like when I mentioned earlier that her landlady's really hard on her and her single mother, it gave the impression that her mother's someone to sympathize with. And that's just not the case. Her home life is established really early on, and it's not pretty. Sawa's mother is hardly ever around, because she's off with one of her many boyfriends, not because she's working hard to provide for her daughter. Time moves really quickly in this series, so an exact time frame was a little hard to pin down, but I think it's safe to say Sawa sometimes goes weeks without seeing her, which honestly is hard to even be mad about, because Sawa is so much better off without her. Sawa's mother is emotionally abusive in a way that's got me convinced that there must be some sort of personality disorder at work. I don't know how many of you have ever had to deal with mental illness in a parent, but those scenes struck a really deep chord with me that I haven't felt in a while. Like, it's great to see those interactions brought to life in a way that felt so genuine, but also, it hurt. And it hurt to recognize the way Sawa dealt with it, which was to try to just not engage with her mother at all, because she's learned nothing good can come from that interaction. The first time we really see it, Sawa's just come home from an outing with her new friends to find that her mother's also returned, and she looks cheerful enough, but there are barbs hidden in every single sentence. Where have you been? Why haven't I heard about these new friends? Offhand comments about how the new outfit Sawa's wearing doesn't really suit her blends into demands to see her phone. One of the responses that really hurt was hearing Sawa's little inner monologue about how she learned a long time ago to immediately delete any voicemails or text messages and never to keep contacts saved. When she doesn't get anywhere with her questions, Sawa's mother turns to guilt-tripping her. Why are you being so cold to me? I said I was sorry. Don't you know how hard I work for you? Which quickly turns into screaming about how ungrateful Sawa is, and that this is why nobody wants to be friends with her. And this is all the second she walks in the door. It's bad. And it's worse that it's so familiar for her. All the way back in grade school, when Sawa came home crying because her friends told her to stop hanging out with them, without really giving her a reason. Her mother told her it was because she was just unlikable. There's really no question how Sawa ended up with the mindset she did, that there was something just inherently wrong with her and everything was always her fault. It had been instilled in her for as long as she could remember. But in a way, that makes watching her come out of her shell and realize she can and does deserve to be happy that much more poignant. I feel almost like we're seeing an evolution of Natsuki Takaya's protagonists over time. There was Toru, who had her struggles, but never let that stop her from helping anyone who needed it, or focusing on the positives in her life. Saku, from Twinkle Stars, was a little closer to Sawa with the situation with her parents, but she was still really positive and hardworking overall, managing to at least mentally stow away her family troubles, if not actively deal with them. And finally, Sawa, who did get bogged down by her problems and wasn't able to overcome them. Sawa feels the most real to me. Toru and Saku both had this main protagonist shine to them, but Sawa was just a sad girl with a rough life. It makes the moments she does open up and start to overcome her past that much more rewarding. She's more relatable. And I don't think that'll be true just for me, though I felt I related to her on an unusually specific, personal level. In general, she feels real, and her story is moving. I really liked Sawa as a character. There weren't any characters I really disliked, apart from the landlady and her mother, of course, but the Somas were definitely a weaker component this time around. They're all interesting in their own ways, we're just not given enough time with any of them to really get to know them. Ironically, it fell into the same hole the first anime adaptation did. Where the next generation Somas are concerned, Fruits Basket Another started to feel like this race to introduce as many characters as possible before the 3 volumes were over. I kind of get it. Meeting their kids was like an indirect way of catching up with the original cast, but there's just barely enough time to introduce them, so you can bet actual development is minimal. Same goes for Sawa's 2 non-Soma classmates and the 2 non-Soma student council members, who might as well have not existed at all for all we get to see of them. As much as I appreciate a taste of the bigger picture, I feel like if it had been limited to just a few, they would have been a lot more memorable overall, and actually, my mental few still brings the cast up to 6, counting Sawa. Fruits Basket Another really does throw a ton of characters at you for only being 3 volumes long. So, in conclusion, it may not have been the masterpiece that the original was, but Fruits Basket Another certainly didn't disappoint, and honestly, given more time, I do think it could have lived up to its legacy. Sawa's story was done really well, but the aspect of the series that's more likely to draw you in, well, at the end of it all, it was more that my passion for the original was revived, not so much that a new passion for the sequel had really taken root. But I did feel it sucking me in right away, and I'm hoping, after I reread it another time or two, that the next-gen characters will leave more of an impact overall. I definitely suggest checking this one out. I was really surprised I hadn't heard anything about it, so hopefully I can help to spread the word too. Thank you for watching.